Everyone wants to go to heaven when they die, but what would it be like if you were sent to the 9 levels of hell and became the demon king there? Eating nutritious things like the most delicious folklore beans in hell is something the female demon of the Sukubusu species is so passionate about that she is willing to promise for 100 years. So in the 9 levels of hell, filled with lava, dead bodies piled up with tens of thousands of demons, they fought endlessly until he appeared, sitting on the throne of the Demon King. He has everything he wants, just say a word and someone will carry it to his mouth, but O Kong Jiu finds it not enough, always criticizing this hell for being the same every day to the point of boredom. The Demon King in dark armor emitted magical purple light. The king of thousands of demons was staring at Ba Lak, waiting for a response from him. He bowed respectfully and asked why he wanted to return to that place when he had everything here. He asked eloquently, but the Demon King answered with a silent silence, as if asking him to ask if he didn't know or not. Ba Lak sweat dropped before the Demon King's purple but dreamless eyes. The burning fire from his head reached the hands of the leader of the 10,000 demons, as if he was very upset, then he answered a few short words. The power of gluttony somehow made Ba Lak sweat profusely. Even the 7 princes of hell were devoured alive by his ultimate power that came from devouring 10,000 demons of hell. The group of demon shrimps behind Ba Lak trembled and sweated like malaria, muttering that the Demon King was angry. If you're angry, the Demon King has to eat. There's no one here who's qualified to eat like Ba Lak. He knew that, that's why he was sweating profusely. Don't say the Demon King intended to put it in his mouth. Is there anything that says everything here? His arms waved, muttering, I have been stuck in this cursed place for 10,000 years. It looks very majestic, but it's the same scene, no different, killing and killing every day. The Demon King put down his hand holding the mask and roared, you don't see that I'm missing something to have everything. Under the mask, the Demon King O Kong Jiu cursed fiercely, but Ba Lak underneath was all upset. He also said that it meant he was still hungry, so he turned to his subordinates behind and told him to quickly prepare food for the Demon King to eat. 2 gray-skinned devils carried a plate with a large lid, walking across the red carpet when Ba Lak repeatedly introduced this as a simple appetizer brought to him. Lifting the metal lid revealed an octopus-like demon covered in warts wriggling underneath. Ba Lak confidently introduced Focolor's head, the most delicious thing in the underworld right now, inviting him to swallow it. O Kong Jiu grabbed that thing and threw it straight at Ba Lak's head. You motherfuckers go eat it yourself. I don't want these 3 cheap things. Looking at the crawling tentacles secreting blue water, it looked like it was picked up from the Sea of Japan releasing radioactivity. Kong Jiu said in disgust that I won't eat. His whole body exuded a fiery power that made Ba Lak suddenly feel a shock. What I want to eat is kimchi stew. As soon as he finished speaking, the subordinates below were confused. Kimchi stew is what the Demon King is looking for. Suddenly, the whole crowd of demons seethed strangely. They screamed loudly. He wanted to eat kimchi stew. Surely that's the name of a dish filled with piled up raw meat. Just listening to it made the demons' imaginations fly high. They also liked it. Ba Lak and his juniors waved their hands happily. What does the Demon King need to make that dish? What's the end of your ass? Internal organs or gizzard intestines, as long as you tell us, we will bring them back immediately. Kong Jiu only knows how to hold on to his feelings. Kimchi soup is also vegetarian. Why are these people only flesh and blood? It's hard for him to blame them. They can't be responsible for food when they fight and kill their opponents, and the entertainment in their eyes is the pleasure they get from killing other kids. For example, Ba Lak kept singing the Devil King song, especially when he killed the 7 princes of hell. Who knows that Kong Jiu just wants to read romance novels and watch reviews on Mr. Tom's channel. Ba Lak didn't understand his boss's needs, but he clenched his fists on the ground, bowed his head sadly when he couldn't satisfy Konggu's needs. So tears and snot streamed down his eyes and he cried and shouted, "Please kill me because it's so useless." Looking at Ba Lak screaming for 1 or 2 to kill him, Kong Jiu was speechless. Just now, who was afraid that his head would be chewed off and he would sweat? He sat on his throne and suddenly sighed, I wish I had even just one person who loved me. What did the Demon King say? Isn't there someone who always loves you? With her long white legs under her plump buttocks, Lilith lightly walked towards him and heard the sound of her shoes clicking. Where is she going? The demon fans came there. Everyone praised Lilith as beautiful, the most beautiful person in hell and also extremely sexy. Coming before the Demon King, Lilith greeted with her sexy lips, then cried with 1 2 3 4 5 7 10 eyes on her forehead. The resentful Demon King already has Lilith's heart but isn't satisfied yet? Kongu's withered heart looked like it was about to die. Isn't this sad enough here? Why does this demon still appear? Lilith saw Kongu's gloomy face and shyly said, if you just say the word, I'll sleep with you right away. Okay, I'm begging you, as the Demon King, please don't come any closer or I'll break your neck. She thought Kong Ji-yu was a virgin, so she was shy and didn't dare to get close. She took the initiative and sent one of her tentacles to tightly wrap around his arm. The demon subordinates below howled and screamed as if they saw that the OTP couple was so happy that they were finally together. Been here for 10,000 years, but Kong Ji-yu and their tastes don't match at all. The queen of the succubus, who in legend always devoured men's young, was to him an ugly ant full of tentacles. She put the book close to his head and smiled enchantingly like, if you just turn your face here I will give you a fiery kiss. But Kong Ji-yu was so scared that the whole tent was scared. He just hugged his face and told you to get away from your father. In Kongu's eyes, compared to the soulful succubus who always pokes grapefruit at him, Balak looks much cuter. It's like a mature puppy wanting to kill this person or that person every time he makes a mistake, but in any case, he doesn't force him to stare at him. I know I shouldn't look at someone's face and body image it, but this Lilith's face is so disgusting I can't stand it. Kong Ji-yu didn't want to see another second. He held out his hand and clenched it in determination. Earth, I must return to Earth. The Demon King, the king of thousands of demons, wanted to return to Earth, so why did Balak, Lilith, and all his demon brothers and sisters howl in terror? They screamed loudly, only making Kong Ji-yu more certain of that thought than ever. 10,000 years in hell, biting the last 7 princes in this place, it's finally time to leave. Kong Ji-yu stood up, ignoring the 2 boys, one hairy and the other full of eyes, talking in his ears. He must go receive his reward after 10,000 years of being trapped in hell. Balak, prepare that for me. His eyes looked seriously at his subordinate, interrupting his meaningless words of advice. Using that thing means that the Demon King already wants to do business. He was about to bend down and whisper more. Kongu's overwhelming aura and fierce eyes stared at it. Do you want me to repeat it myself again? Don't dare. Balak Ghost collapsed to the floor and closed his eyes tightly to apologize. Now he will go prepare immediately. It glanced back and roared at the group of subordinates who were waiting for something to happen. Color went to call Aemon and prepare tools for the 7 great wonders. The crowd below shouted loudly. This time the Demon King was really angry. Anyone who was rude would surely die. A moment later, old Aemon appeared with a staff and a gesture like he was performing magic in the place they called the 7 Great Wonders. Each statue was here silently holding a piece of equipment, facing something designed like a curled tentacle, emitting a blinding light in the middle. Balak extended his hand to invite the Ghost King to step up. All preparations had been completed. He just needed to get there and it would be over. Lilith still sat crying, sobbing and looking after. Even Ba shook his eyes when he saw Kong Ji-yu drop the heavy armor on his body. He alone walked each step of the 100-step staircase to reach Aemon. As soon as he arrived, the witch immediately told him how to transfer a large amount of magic power into the instrument of the 7 wonders, bending the boundaries of time and space, creating a space-time rift that would make things happen as he wished. Kudos to the old man for fully preparing everything. Now let's get going. Kong Ji-yu stood still, quietly releasing his magic power, feeling excited that maybe this time he would be able to go home. It takes a tremendous amount of magic power to activate the 7 Great Wonders tools. He closed his eyes and concentrated, calling out his tens of thousands of magic cores like a river rushing towards the hanging ball-shaped device. A few seconds passed. Suddenly Kongu's ball filled with magic power seemed to be overloaded and burst, releasing huge power like a column of light that poured straight down onto the floor of the 7 Great Wonders. The witch Aemon tried to resist that power so as not to fly away. Looking at the Demon King still standing tall, he couldn't help but be overwhelmed. Just looking at the terrifying magic power makes people feel like they are bewitched and controlled by the Demon King, forcing it to open a space-time rift. The large area echoed with a few sounds as Kongu's energy dissipated. The stone statues that were previously silent suddenly opened their bright eyes, looking straight into their hearts. Kong Ji is deploying tens of thousands of magic cores. Aemon realized that all 7 statues had opened their eyes and shouted at the Demon King to let him know that the 7 pieces of the tool had all reacted and the door would soon open. The space-time crack appeared like a piece of broken glass. Kong Ji pulled his head out and draped the cloak over his body, waiting for it to open large enough to pass through. He secretly thought that if he returned this time, even if his family, friends and loved ones weren't there, it would still be better than this damn place. So Kong Ji decisively went straight into the space-time rift, leaving behind Lilith's sobs. She cried so hard that Ba Lak didn't dare stop her. Kong Ji looked back and saw all 10 eyes were wet with tears, sobbing and asking him if he really had the heart to leave her. He turned his head as quickly as he could, saying only 2 words, "Don't cry," to make Lilith stop immediately. Her heart was filled with love because the Demon King comforted her. Although it was a bit cold, those were the gentle words he gave me. Who knew? Kong Ji said those 2 words just to stop himself from vomiting. It's so disgusting, Mom. When the bracelet attached to Lilith's dress hissed, creating small balls, then exploded in Kongu's ear, he panicked and heard a call to go back to hell and not go home again. In addition to this Lilith girl insisting on following Kong Ji back to Earth, he became a motherfucker and jumped through the closing door of time and space. The girl was holding her big, heavy breasts and couldn't keep up, calling out in pain for the Demon King, but Kong Ji pretended to care. When he turned back, he could only hear Lilith's small voice as if she was screaming, and finally she smiled contentedly and raised her middle finger. Goodbye. See you never again. When he plunged into the crack a bit, he saw something spherical waiting at his feet. After 10,000 years in hell, Kong Ji felt he no longer cared about the future or the past. He just needed to return to the Earth he once knew. Landing gently on the space-time formation, Kong Ji could no longer hold back the happy smile on his lips. He could finally return to Earth. Who would have thought that the bridge fan flashed blue and white rays like an electric leak? From where did the status window pop up, indicating the detection of a crack nucleus? The gear protection system was activated. Where did the red light grid come from? Appeared in midair, like a table cage collapsing onto the area where Kong Ji was standing. He was bewildered and did not understand anything, only seeing countless consecutive windows indicating that the nuclear energy was stronger than the limit, activating the entire defense mechanism of the dimension. It has been many years since Kong Ji found himself confused by something. The nucleus of the crack is him. No one else is coming here. But why does it say that? Now it also says the gear system is overloaded. A few bolts of lightning from the protective net hit straight down where Kong Ji was standing, making him scream in pain and feel dizzy. The OI system continuously reported failure to completely remove the crack's nucleus. The whole area turned purple-pink while Kong Ji was continuously struck by lightning. It popped out some new information again. The ceiling limit had begun. Kong Ji raised his hand trembling in pain forward, trying to lift his eyes from under his sweaty eyebrows. He felt himself fainting, only having time to curse the word, bitch, and then lose consciousness. When he woke up, it was so bright outside that Kong Ji had to close one eye. By the time he realized that the dazzling thing was sunlight, he was lying on a glade in the middle of a green forest full of leaves, wondering if this was the Earth. He struggled to sit up, wanting to check his body condition first. He seemed extremely sore. The status window similar to the notification from before suddenly popped up right in front of my eyes. Then the information panel with his photo appeared in full display. On it is written the name O Kong Ji, Level 1 Awakener. Most of the power has been sealed. Current attribute is Hunting. Level Unknown. Phase 2 attribute only opens when level 10. More the lines marking physical strength, mental ability, and magical power do not show numbers but instead show 2 innate words. But what caught Kongu's attention the most was that most of his abilities had been sealed. I didn't understand what it meant, but behind me I heard a squealing sound like a group of pigs being pricked. As soon as he looked back, Kong Ji-yu realized that a group of green goblins were rushing in this direction. Why is this ugly green creature here? The earth he knew did not have them. Whatever the reason is no longer important, Kong Ji-yu decided to use his strength to deal with all those small shrimp. But it seemed like there was something wrong here because his hand that should have been full of magic power was useless. How did he come at the right time, my friend? Are you still in the tens of thousands of magic cores, unable to use magic power while you're here? Well, I don't have time to think anymore. They're here. He regained his composure, tightened his grip and switched to a physical attack. With just a light swipe, the two goblins were broken in half. Using Senesi's kendo skills, a huge sword grew from Kongu's arm, a bit bulky but incredibly strong. His eyes lit up. When he saw another goblin preparing to attack, he did not hesitate to rush forward and give it a taste of death. His hand swung the sword as fast as lightning, only to see red blood pouring out. The system continuously reported increasing experience and leveling up to level 4. After smashing his demon into 3 pieces and flying everywhere, Kong Ji-yu fell into deep contemplation, wondering what had just happened. What's the point in gaining experience and then leveling up? It sounds so incompetent, but it seems like he feels like he's really gotten stronger. Looking back at the green grass filled with dismembered body parts, Kong Ji-yu didn't know what to say. Now I have to get stronger to kill goblins comfortably. Now gathering new information is the most important. He uses the hunting skill, which is also the only skill granted by the system. He sucked the soul back to try to determine what these goblins were, which was not surprising. But what made Kongu's eyes widen in surprise was the status window indicating an increase in magic power by 1 point. How can the power that only exists in hell exist on Earth? Could it be that this is not Earth? Shocked, he sat down and scratched his head, his face gradually becoming more gloomy. The reason for holding out for so many years in hell is to find a chance to return to Earth. Is this any different from avoiding a melon shell and a coconut shell? While immersed in extreme suffering, a scream echoed from deep in the forest, making Kong Ji-yu, who was covering his ears, hear it clearly. This sound did not sound like a monster's scream at all. Not daring to believe his ears, he carefully listened again to make sure. The octave scream rang out again, helping Kong Ji-yu to be sure it was human, immediately turning on the speed skill and disappearing into the forest. For 10,000 years, he had only seen hideous demons. It seemed he had forgotten how round and distorted the human shape was. Kong Ji-yu galloped silently to himself. Please be human, just need 2 eyes, 1 nose and 1 mouth. It doesn't matter if it's ugly or scary, it's okay to have lice or lice. But the tentacles look like a bunch of Lilith in hell. Kong Ji-yu fainted for 3 days and 3 nights. A moment later, he found the source of the sound calling for help. A group of demons were scurrying about seeing something. Their hearts were purple, and their minds kept thinking that they were humans. Please help me. Eyes focused on that person, eyes sparkling with tears, a small nose and mouth, and, oh my gosh, this is important, a large bowl of fruit filled to the brim. Checking the map from head to toe, there wasn't a single tentacle, and it was a beautiful, bubbly girl. Kong Ji-yu seemed at the peak of joy, crying the line, "Oh my god, I did it." At that time, the demons below were fiercely swinging their knives, causing the purple-haired girl to fall into the tree trunk in fear, her eyes closing tightly. After waiting for a long time, I couldn't see the blade and felt the wind passing by, so I secretly opened my eyes to see what was going on. All I see in front of me is a very cool guy cutting the demon's throat, and behind him is a pile of demon corpses lying around. Kong Ji-yu politely extended his hand towards the purple hair. The girl stammered her thanks and then shyly held out her hand. This innocent look was enough to captivate every guy's heart. What to say about the person who was trapped in hell for 10,000 years? As soon as the girl's finger touched his hand, He missed the fourth beat like Bitch Fuang's song, both body and mind immersed in the moment. This moment, the girl did not notice that Konggu's body was trembling. She thanked her for saving her life and introduced her name as Sella. Seeing her father trembling in front of her, Sella was a little worried and asked, "Are you okay?" But suddenly his hand was jerked forward. Kong Ji-yu put his face close to the girl's face and excitedly said, "Baby, please marry me. I'm afraid the person won't confess yet, so he'll pay me back. One more question, let's get married." His radiant face and those words made Sella stiffen with glue. She had met a crazy man, everyone. Only then did Kong Ji-yu realize that he had made a mistake, quickly apologized and then covered up that I was just joking just now to compensate for the humiliation, not forgetting to ask how her wound was. Luckily, easygoing Sella didn't bother with this crazy guy, happily saying it was okay. But Kong Ji-yu saw her wobbly legs and many scratches. Before he could take a closer look at the wound, Sella fell into Konggu's arms, causing the iPhone to suddenly fall out and hit him right in the eye. "Isn't that a phone?" Looking at the iPhone lying on the grass, he breathed a sigh of relief. He felt like he was back on Earth. Kong Ji-yu carefully helped Sella sit in pain against a tree and then prepared first aid by tearing off his shirt. Now that he's calmed down, he realized that the two of them could communicate with each other in Korean. Gently bandaging Sella's wound, Kong Ji-yu suddenly remembered the days of teaching the kneelers how to speak Korean so that when they returned they wouldn't forget the language, but they were good at fighting, but everyone was good at learning to read. Stupid as cattle. Finally, I can use my mother tongue to talk to people, not those ignorant bastards anymore. After the bandaging was done, the conversation ended. Sella lied and thanked her again, but Kong Ji-yu just smiled and said it was nothing and gave her the phone. As soon as Sella's hand touched the device, the screen lit up, the time and date also appeared, making him extremely surprised that 5 years had passed. Perhaps these monsters appeared while he was in hell. That means the world has changed a lot without Kong Ji-yu knowing it, so the only way is to get information from the purple-haired girl. Kong Ji-yu started talking and asked why Sella was in here. She immediately explained that it was because she had some difficulty that she had to hunt alone inside the gate. He also introduced himself as having just awakened as a player yesterday, his eyes lowered because of his own stupidity, but Kong Ji-yu did not criticize the little girl for being stupid. Because he didn't understand anything she said, those terms sounded like he was playing a game, so he pretended to understand and asked her what level she was. Sella said she was only level 6. Why did a VIP pro like Kong Ji-yu appear at this low-ranking gate? Hearing that, he could only laugh. How could he say his level was lower than hers? So he joked that he was handling the work here. Of course, Sella didn't retort much. She just smiled and nodded to say she understood. Suddenly, their shoulders accidentally touched each other, making her blush as red as a tomato. Standing up like there was a clamshell on her butt, causing Kong Ji-yu to remind her to look after the wound on her leg. Sella said it was fine but her legs were protesting violently. Seeing that, Kong Ji-yu quickly stood up to help, causing the purple hair to panic and blush in confusion. Who can ignore a beautiful girl who is injured, especially when she has no tentacles and no spare parts? 8 eyes. Kong Ji-yu did not give purple hair a chance to refuse, determined to help her go anyway. Sella had no choice but to ask him to take her to the exit. Kong Ji-yu was very satisfied with his conversation with a human being after 10,000 long years. Even if the first part is a little rough, it's still okay. Proof that Sella doesn't doubt her identity at all. Thinking about it, Kong Ji-yu excitedly helped the purple-haired girl out to the edge of the forest. At this rate, he would quickly integrate into life on Earth. After walking for a while, they arrived at the place Sella said. The two of them raised their eyes to see a large transmission circle swirling in front of them. Kong Ji-yu realized that this place was not really Earth, but he did not understand how the space gap could appear so majestically when there were no tools or magic power strong enough to maintain a gate around. Big like this. While thinking, Sella suddenly pushed Konggu's hand away, pulling him back to reality. Kong Ji-yu cautiously stepped inside the gate with purple hair, encountered an invisible suction force rushing towards him, causing him to cover his eyes with his hand, until he felt the light shining in, then opened his eyes. The scene in front of him made Kang Ji-yu completely excited, opening his eyes wide as if he wanted to capture every moment. The man who was recruiting members for the E-Gate Goblin hunting team had all the eyes, nose, and mouth. The two people were staring intently at the screen nearby, only having one head, 2 arms and 2 legs. The group of people arguing in front cursed that there was nothing strange about dressing like Lin Za. Kang Ji-yu stood in front of the bustling crowd, but no one with 3 heads and 6 arms or any guy with a buffalo head and horse face appeared. The bright sunlight shined down on the high-rise buildings, and the familiar sound of laughter continuously hit Kang Gu's ears. Sella stood behind and saw her brother trembling again. She glanced over a few times in confusion, wondering if her father was truly crazy. But how could she understand the deep feelings in Kang Gu's heart, sobbing tears of happiness? Luck finally smiled on him after 10,000 years, to break this atmosphere of confusing silence. Sella took a few steps back, then bent 90 degrees, softly calling Kang Ji-yu, Oppa, causing him to turn around and replay. I just saw her making a cute and shy gesture asking, do you want to come to my house for a meal? Hearing that, Kang Gu's face turned 9 times redder. Now Sella in his eyes is a radiant goddess. Rice and water are always the same because spring has bloomed in Kang Gu's heart. Love has come to a straight FA guy like me for 10,000 years. Star. He's already thought about how to take wedding photos and what the baby's name will be, ahihi. However, I still pretend to be classy and addicted, but I still have to keep the price a little bit so people won't look down on me. Just as he was about to move his lips, a call interrupted. 2 men armed from head to toe stepped forward, wanting to confirm their player cards. While Sella frantically rummaged through her bag, Kang Ji-yu just stood there with a blank face, who knew what the tin card looked like, making the other 2 brothers keep urging him. Sighing in frustration, he knew he had to use that thing. He pretended to reach into his pocket like Sella. His eyes suddenly changed into an enchanting blue and slowly raised his hand in front of a guard. The skill to bend perception and manipulate targets according to one's will is Dantalion's power of vision. The green and odd green demon was covering his pitiful eyes, looking from the rotten finger to a card. Yes, 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 it was confirmed. By the time the 2 players were gone, he was still in a coma. Even though his teammates were calling out to him that this guy was at work, he still fell asleep. Kang Ji-yu followed Sella back to an old apartment complex, purple-haired, embarrassed because the place where he lived didn't have an elevator, but he didn't even care about that. The nose screams and sniffs like a puppy. Kang Ji-yu likes the nose of this old apartment. Going up the narrow stairs is no problem. Along the way, he also touched the sketchy iron railing, looked at the dusty window. Everything helped Kang Ji-yu clearly feel that he was really in the real world. But most special of all the countless places on Earth, he is coming to the house of the beautiful single girl Sella. What could be better than this? It turns out he was inferring it himself, but I haven't said anything yet, everyone. Kang Gu's whole body burst into flames of love. He was happily thinking of himself and purple hair like this and that, when he heard Sella calling for mother, with the voice of a middle-aged woman. Resounded. The smile on his lips suddenly disappeared, his face stiffened, wondering if he had heard wrong. A scene of mother-son love often appears before Kang Gu's eyes, making all his illusions fly away. Really eating, I thought I wanted to have dinner with you but I was afraid it would be your dinner. Sella happily introduced to her mother that this was the person who saved her today, so she invited him to her house for dinner, not paying attention to Kang Gu's face as he was busy saying hello. Sella's mother gently held his hand and thanked him repeatedly, not knowing how to repay him. Kang Ji-yu awkwardly smiled and said it was nothing, then was immediately invited inside by his purple-haired mother. You can make yourself at home but don't forget that you are a guest. We laughed and talked as we walked in, but in our hearts we were still missing the opportunity to eat alone with a pretty girl. Trying to keep a positive look, the more crowded the meal, the more fun it would be. The mother hurried inside to cook food for the guests. Sella also planned to change and help her mother. The phone in Sella's hand caught Kang Gu's eye, and he suddenly remembered that he needed to collect information about the Earth. Boone said he lost his phone, so he wanted to borrow hers to use for a bit. Sela didn't suspect anything, but it was okay. Feel free to give him the phone to use right away. The feeling of placing his hand on the touchscreen makes Kong Ji-yu extremely excited. It's been 10,000 years since he's been exposed to high-tech gadgets, but now is not the time to be admiring. He must search for information about what has already begun. Since 5 years ago, Kong Ji-yu turned on Google and searched for news of 2018, and a series of shocking headlines appeared before him. On February 22, 2018, the world faced an unprecedented disaster in human history. Hundreds of gates appeared everywhere, opening the way for monsters to escape and attack people. All human weapons are ineffective against them. Countless soldiers die on the battlefield. Since then, the Emergency Disaster Alliance was established. Korea is the 9th country to join the alliance. The miracle happened when the first awakened person appeared in America. After that, the number of awakened people, also known as players, continuously increased. People see this as the hope of humanity being able to repel monsters and save the earth from destruction. Kong Ji-yu was speechless after absorbing so much strange information. Was there ever a time when he was missing a person who ate candy instead of rice? However, there is one article that is attracting his attention. The mysterious gate that appeared in the middle of Seoul on August 22 was the day he was dragged to hell. Kong Ji-yu couldn't help but silently hypothesize in surprise. Could it be that he was pulled into one of the portals that appeared that day? My hand scrolled down to find more information, but it was all trash tabloids, so I had to figure out a way to find out more information. The food was ready. A huge pot was placed on the table. Kong Ji-yu quickly put the phone aside. His pupils widened as if he wanted to fly out. The sour and spicy aroma, along with the eye-catching red broth that was steaming with smoke, wasn't it the food he had been wanting for so long? His whole body was stiff like a statue, unable to close his mouth, just like the whole world. Collected with the same pot of kimchi stew in front of you. You heard right, it's the kimchi stew he's been wanting for so long. Kong Ji-yu quickly picked up the teapot, slowly scooped out some soup and a small piece of tofu. On the other side, the mother and son were also inviting back and forth to prepare to eat. Suddenly Sela heard a blowing sound, so she looked over and immediately saw a strange scene. The hidden person was trembling as he put the soup into his mouth. That strange appearance also attracted the mother's attention, so mother and son sat silently watching Kong Ji-yu eat. As soon as he swallowed a mouthful of hot soup, he quickly scooped up more, swallowed without missing a drop, then scooped up a spoonful of rice and devoured it. Seeing Kong Ji-yu eating with his life like that, mother and son felt embarrassed and thought that this guy had been starving for several days. People don't know how miserable he lived 5 years ago, number 10,000 years ago. Suddenly falling into a dark prison, in order to survive, Kong Ji-yu had to eat raw meat and drink bloody blood. Because he was still human, his taste told him that this kind of rice was not good, but his intense hunger caused Kong Ji-yu to continuously devour demon meat. Many times he thought he had gone crazy, to the point where the terrible despair caused him to wither away. Even so, Kangoo still gritted his teeth to overcome everything, with only one wish: to return to Earth again. The day finally came. The spicy feeling in his mouth made Kong Ji-yu burst into tears. This was the taste that helped him realize that this was real and not just a fantasy. The mother and son on the other side were extremely worried, not understanding why this young man was sobbing like that. Kong Ji-yu burst into tears, mumbled the food, put his head down on the table and said, "I'm really, really grateful for this meal." Right then, Sela hesitated for a moment and then smiled softly. "I was the one who should have said thank you, but I only returned the favor with a few simple rice and soup dishes on the table with purple hair, feeling extremely guilty." But seeing Kong Ji-yu eating so deliciously, made her feel very satisfied. He was still in tears, asking for another bowl. Sela's mother was also very happy that this grandchild liked to eat the rice she cooked, but the happiest person at this moment was Kong Ji-yu. Just after finishing the bowl of soup, the goddess brought out the entire rice cooker for her. If the seafood dish doesn't contain kimchi or rice, just eat it plain. Kong Ji-yu was excitedly shoveling rice into his mouth when a huge explosion blew away the straw above his head. A tall figure appeared in the cloud of smoke, and the sound of curses continued to ring out. The door was so hard. Surla and her mother hurriedly ran outside to check the situation, only to see an angry foot stomping on bricks and a roar. Han Surla quickly show his face here. The blonde-haired guy looks nervous and opens his mouth to shout. As soon as he saw Surla show his face, he hastily stepped forward and asked with an irritated look, "Who let you enter the gate so freely?" Surla was so angry that her face turned pale. She stared at him, then coldly spit out 3 words. "Go away. What the hell are you talking about?" The blonde suppressed her anger and contemptuously looked down, and saw Surla angry. "Go away. You bastard Han Tae Yun. A crazy dog like you doesn't deserve to enter this house." Blonde-hair was stunned and widened his eyes as he listened to purple hair cursing him like a child, until he heard the part where Surla said, "I was capable of fighting you." He put his head down and laughed hard. "It's so scary. Ha ha ha, I'm dying of laughter." The examiner laughed loudly like a madman, his mouth still mumbling as he imitated Surla's words. But immediately glared threateningly, and at the same time punched the wall next to him to show authority. "Do you think you have the right to speak up here?" Surla strongly stood up to protect her mother. A gentle person like her was forced to the point of blushing to the point of her ears. Tae Yun's eyes suddenly turned to the mother. She was terrified, her face turned pale and her face trembled continuously. He sadly turned his head away and clicked his tongue a few times. His father died early and even his mother was poor. Those insulting words made Surla unable to bear it anymore and cursed. "The reason why everything was so bad was not because of you, you jerk. It was all because of you, you bastard." Tae Yun didn't care about those curses, grabbed Surla's hand and dragged her away, intending to take her to hand over to the Andres group. Knowing his evil intentions, she tried to restrain her legs to the point of plowing the entire floor, screaming, "Even if I die, I will not join that group of trash." Tae Yun laughed at Surla's hopeless efforts, determined to drag her head away, realizing that he was not strong enough to resist him. Surla used all her strength to bite her brother's wrist. Tae Yun painfully raised his arms high and blew his purple hair away, causing her to fall with her mouth on the ground in her mother's surprise. Angrily holding the bleeding spear, Tae Yun gritted his teeth, causing the veins to clearly show on his crazy face. "I pamper you so much that you're spoiled, right?" He threatened Surla to obediently become a tribute. Hearing the words tribute made the mother's face turn gloomy. She still couldn't stop her groping, becoming more and more outrageous. Tae Yun used his white eyes to look at the 2 women in front of him and asked fiercely, "Or do you want to use the player's method to solve the problem?" "Tae Yun, I beg you." The mother used an urgent voice to plead for her daughter. She placed her hand on her disobedient son's hand, hoping he would reconsider. But having been thrown away mercilessly, Tae Yun did not hesitate to call his wife a piece of trash, and at the same time physically impacted her so that she fell down. Surla looked at her mother in horror, trying to shake her body, but she lay still and motionless without her son feeling the slightest bit guilty. Hearing his sister's pitiful screams for his mother, he was visibly upset as if he was hearing something full of contempt. Surla glanced away with tears in her eyes, looking at her mean brother with hateful eyes. "Gi. Who are you to keep your eyes on me, you bastard?" Surla didn't say a word, but the look of hatred in his eyes made Tae Yun understand that suffering. He growled and threatened with the name of Level 2 fake love, ready to leave no retreat for his younger brother. Tae Yun's rough hand grabbed Surla's face. His mouth roared. "The only thing you have is this face, you idiot. As long as you join the green android group you won't be able to finish your sentence." Ears. His dog-like hearing suddenly heard a slurping sound somewhere, turned his head to the right and immediately saw a kid carrying a pot of kimchi soup and slurping enthusiastically. The yellowhead was furious at the sudden presence of a stranger. He didn't pay any attention to the noise outside, but just continuously scooped up pots on the table, causing Tae Yun to keep quiet. The corner of his mouth twitched repeatedly. Who the fuck was he going to show again? Letting go of the hand holding Surla's face, he decisively walked straight to the dining table, making the purple hair extremely worried for his benefactor. Kong Ji-yu was immersed in the world of kimchi, scooping soup and putting it in his mouth, completely ignoring the appearance of the yellow-headed guy. He puffed his cheeks, brought the food to the table, and even praised how delicious it was. Seeing that, Tae Yun scratched his head and left. I was still wondering why this guy suddenly became so gentle when he suddenly turned around and kicked, causing the entire huge dining table to fly up into the air. Time seemed to freeze before Konggu's eyes. The purple-haired guy sitting on the other side covered his mouth in fear, while the blonde-haired thug was grinding his teeth. Kong Ji-yu still kept the tea tray in his hand, eyes wide open as he looked at the scattered food, sitting still until he heard Sarla's loud call. Kong Ji-yu was able to regain his composure and howled in pain. His whole body collapsed painfully into the puddle on the ground, making the blonde man wonder what kind of psychotic attack this guy was having. Sarla was also bitter at his brother, but Konggu's reaction was truly 1-0-2. Hearing his brother sarcastically say, "Where did you get this guy?" he remained silent and said nothing. Turning around, Kong Ji-yu went from sobbing to tears just because of a pot of kimchi. Tae Hyun was bored but he didn't react, so he kicked him with his foot. His red eyes were full of murderous intent, making even the arrogant blonde guy flinch. Tae Yun panicked when he saw the beggar in front of him as the embodiment of a demon, with such overwhelming power that he almost wet his pants. Terrified, Tae Hyun took a few steps back and only heard a few moans. "My meat. My kimchi." This joke-like story made him distraught, wondering if he was hallucinating or not, worried. Biting his lip in fear, he clenched his hand into a fist with two fiery streams of magic rising up. At that moment, the heavy pressure on the blonde hair had disappeared. He was sure he was mistaken. What kind of power could a beggar have? The frustration returned and he was preparing to punch him, when a beam of energy came, but he was able to dodge the attack. Tae Hyun angrily glanced around looking for something to attack him, then immediately saw his sister holding a bow, her mouth constantly shouting for Kong Ji-yu to run away. But suddenly a sharp blade sprouted from Konggu's hand like a werewolf, causing Seller to immediately fall silent and open his eyes wide, his eyes catching the moment Kong Ji-yu ducked down to avoid the group of straight punches. "I'm sure with cheap speed like this I can clearly see Konggu's fist coming out from the left below, but what hit Tae Hyun was a knee that punctured his lung, causing him to stand up in pain and vomit his face green and yellow. The blood vessels in his eyes felt like they were about to burst from anger. Who could blame him for being stupid because he fell into the enemy's trap? Those are the thoughts of normal people, but this blonde crazy guy wouldn't think like that. He inhaled bitterly and clenched his teeth to suppress the pain rolling inside. Stubbornly swinging his arms and lunging at Kong Ji-yu, he kept cursing the son of a bitch. How could those 3 cat scratches make it difficult for Kong Ji-yu? He gently leaned back to dodge the attack, and at the same time launched a kick into the enemy's right flank. Tae Yun is so spicy right now. He's a second-order fake awakening and was stuffed full of onions by a beggar. If this news was passed out, it would be humiliating to tell the story. Luckily, at this moment, the blonde hair caught Konggu's leg, thinking it was about to turn the odds. But I haven't seen the bet turned over yet, but Tom saw it when he turned it over. Kong Ji-yu took advantage of Tae Yun catching his leg to use the momentum to break this chicken's snout, then gently landed on the ground while his opponent in the background. Blood from the nose and mouth kept splashing out. Kong Ji-yu didn't let that idiot have time to recover, immediately rushed forward like a whirlwind, swinging the blade in his left hand to lure the blonde into throwing a punch to block the attack. As soon as Tae Yun made his move, he quickly lowered his body to dodge and threw himself from below to launch a horizontal kick. I only saw the blonde-haired grandpa let out a painful scream. The motherfucker had been tricked again. His white eyes were blurred by pain, because he had just been punched in the stomach by Kong Ji-yu. Consecutive attacks to distract his body, Tae Yun could no longer resist and fell to the floor. Bowing his head before Kong Ji-yu, who was still burning with anger, he silently breathed a sigh of relief at the person who had beaten him into this. Suddenly Tae Yun's face hit the floor. Another bloody screen splattered everywhere. Kong Ji-yu did not forgive this bastard so easily. He used his foot to stomp on the blonde man's head, but Tae Yun still stubbornly tried to prop himself up, intending to ask who the hell you were. Kong-gu's foot force pressed down even harder. He bent down while one foot was still on the golden head. The tip of the knife on his right arm protruded and stabbed into Tae Yun's hand. Han's eyes were red as he whispered, "It's not over yet, you dog. There's still a lot of punishment waiting for you for spilling my kimchi." Tae Yun couldn't believe that just because of a pot of kimchi, onions would turn to pulp like this. He clenched his fists and the spiciness increased 100 times. Grabbing the pile of yellow hair on Tae Yun's head, Kong-gu's face was blacker than the bottom of the pot. He looked intently into his eyes, using a deep voice to emphasize each word. "Are you just talking about a pot of kimchi?" Seeing that, Tae Yun was so scared that he was so dazed that he couldn't say the words. No, I mean it." Before he could finish speaking, his head hit the ground. As if he had lost his reason, Kong Ji-yu frantically hit the guy's head like rice. He couldn't accept that statement that was worse than shit. Angrily, he gritted his teeth and climbed, temporarily released his hand, leaned into Tae Yun's hand, who was unconscious on the kumquat trellis, and said, "I count 1, you say kimchi. I count 2, you say it's a God-given treasure. Bark loudly and listen. Is it punctured yet?" His fingers trembled as he repeated the sign that he understood. Kong Ji-yu coldly counted to 1. Tae Yun whispered the word kimchi in a low voice, mistakenly saying he had asked for it. So he punched the wound that was still bleeding, roaring like a pricked pig. Tears streamed down his face as if deformed by pain, continuing that damn number-counting exercise. Knowingly shouted the word, treasure, as soon as the crazy guy counted number 1, easily passing the card. Kong Ji-yu spoke in a low voice to number 2, looking down at his prey with deadly eyes. Tae Yun swallowed his water. Eyes look inside and shout out the treasures from heaven. But the response was too low to satisfy Kong Ji-yu. "Louder for me," he roared with authority, causing the whole room to shake violently. The loud volume startled Sella, but mostly she didn't understand why Kong Ji-yu took revenge for the kimchi pot. Kong Ji-yu seemed about to turn into a demon. He screamed loudly demanding that the blonde hair's volume be as loud as he wanted. Tae Yun was so scared that he sobbed like a child screaming at his grandfather. Kimchi is a treasure from heaven. But Kong Ji-yu was still displeased. His chin wrinkled with anger. "This idiot's fate. Raised his voice to an octave for your father right away." Killing intent and terrible pressure radiated everywhere, causing Tae Yun to use all his strength and open his mouth as wide as possible to scream that kimchi is a heavenly treasure. Realizing that the sound quality seemed better this time, Kong Ji-yu quietly lifted his hand away from the wound, then stood up while the other guy was lying flat at his feet. Lesson learned is never underestimate kimchi and the guy who eats kimchi, remember, dog. Kong Ji-yu warned in a cold voice, his face even darker. What the fuck? Tae Yun was lying in a pool of his own blood, tears continuously flowing out of his eyes, wondering what was wrong with that guy. Could it be that he had just escaped from prison? Honey, he didn't escape from prison. He just escaped from hell. A moment later, the room filled with grease and broken dishes were tidied up and the broken table pieces were also put neatly into cardboard boxes. The mother was still unconscious and had to wrap her head in bandages. Sitting next to her was Sella, extremely worried, waiting for her mother to wake up. The living room echoed with the sound of gurgling water from the kitchen. A pair of pink gloves was diligently washing dishes. Everyone thinks Kong Ji-yu is the one doing the washing, right? But why did he have to do that when he had a new employee, the blonde guy who was sniffling and sniffing the snot that just flowed out of his nose? He was fed a mouth full of onions, was forced to clean up, not only that, but also had his clothes stolen, so he only had a tank top and blue pants on. Looking at Kong Ji-yu leisurely sitting there drinking tea, holding his phone and scrolling through TikTok, Taehyung stopped being angry. A tear fell from his eyes. You wondered why there weren't 2 rows? Look at the other side of his face. It's swollen. He looks guilty, but it's worth it. Yet he was still unwilling to stand here washing dishes, his distorted mouth appearing under the water's surface. So why the hell would I be beaten just for a pot of kimchi soup? Secretly looking back with his indignant eyes, Taehyung became more and more bitter from both pain and humiliation. I thought this real guy was about to rush out and fight, but as soon as Kang Ji-yu gently placed the glass on the table, he was startled and turned 180 degrees forward. It turned out he was just a member of the cowardly group. Kang Ji-yu calmly looked at his phone and asked indifferently, "Are you looking at me?" Scared Taehyung so much that he would pee and scream. No brother would dare. Maybe Kang Ji-yu believed those careless words. He raised his eyes slightly and then fell silent, scaring Taehyung so much that he couldn't breathe. How could that yellow-haired guy understand that having clothes to wear, having 3 meals to eat, or a family to go home to, were the things Kang Ji-yu once wished for? The days of suffering and killing in hell were lonely and miserable. He still remembers every minute and every second like silence. So verses just gently reminded him to appreciate and be grateful for his life. Hearing that, Taehyung said 1 yes and 2 yeses, being obedient like a puppy, but still silently calculating in his head. He must go back and tell the Andros group and teach him a lesson. Why does it take so long to wash dishes? Kang-gu's question rang out to scare Taehyung, who was planning a dirty plan in his mind to scare the hell out of him. Putting his hands on the table, Kang Ji-yu slowly said a few words. He realized that a worthless guy like the blonde guy should not live in poverty. Scared him, his eyes were pale, his sweat was flowing to the ground, he was lost. Could it be that today is the anniversary of his death? This world is not kind to those who are arrogant. He grabbed Taehyung's shirt and turned around to look at him with a murderous look. The two people seemed to stretch out to reveal a strange purple light. His mouth said he wouldn't kill Taehyung, but the look like death was staring at the person in the book of life and death, and the smile that he knew he could send this guy away at any time, made Taehyung think for a moment that he was truly his soul was taken to hell and tormented. Kang Ji-yu is also scary, but mainly because the demon Orobus's power of fear has been activated. The purple three-eyed demon is towering in front of Taehyung. It grabbed the guy who was weakly saying no, then pressed its head down and used its ghostly eyes to manipulate him. Hands from nowhere continuously floated up to grab the blonde man, causing him to only roar and wail, preferring to die than face this disgusting thing. That horror was engraved deeply into Taehyung's mind. By the time he escaped the illusion, he was still trembling with fear to the point of peeing his pants. His face was completely pale. His body looked like it was about to fall apart because he kept staring at Kang Ji-yu. His eyes were sharp and cold, telling him not to say a word. It's done. So you should go back to the barn. Orobus's truth is not only used to deepen fear but also turn the opponent into the master's puppet. So Kang Ji-yu felt secure in letting him disappear like that. Kang-gu's disheveled appearance wasn't worth paying attention to. He just mumbled, "Poor bastard," and let Taehyung open the door himself and get out. While Sella was stunned and looked at her brother, she didn't feel sorry for him. She just felt grateful to the benefactor who helped her family escape a disaster. Kang Ji-yu resisted the urge to think about what the yellow-haired guy said just now while his fingers continuously scrolled across the screen, saying that he looked no different from a beggar. It's true that it hurts to say it out loud. It's true that Kang Ji-yu is really poor and has no money in his pocket. Just now, he looked so serious while holding the phone. He was actually asking Ms. Google how to make money. Little did she know that Sella was secretly admiring her handsome oppa. After a while of searching, I found something related to my experience, specifically selling monster magic stones. Kang Ji-yu quickly turned to ask Sella if he had a magic stone, making him startle, then quickly searched his bag to find him an E-grade magic stone from goblin hunting. Kang Ji-yu grabbed the stone to see if there was any change, because in the other article it was mentioned that the more the color leans towards black, the higher the rank will be. However, I held it for half a day without feeling any magic power, even though there was a power inside it. When fighting with goblins in the forest, Kang Ji-yu also felt a bit of magic power. At first he thought the magic power would be in the magic stone, but it turned out that the energy contained in the stone was just magic. It's a type of magic that looks like magic, but it hasn't yet reached the level of magic power and demonic power. A difficult question was posed to Kang Ji-yu. Where does magic power come from? I couldn't figure it out, so I just returned the things to Sella, knowing that I had to sell magic stones to get money. Remembering that as soon as he left the gate, he met 2 security guards, meaning that there would be a place to manage fake awakeners. So Kang Ji-yu quickly asked Sella where the nearest office was. Being told that he was next to the Seoul train station, Kang Ji-yu was planning to go right away and Sella offered to go with him, making him quite surprised. Sella immediately explained that her family's situation was not good, so she boldly entered the gate without realizing the danger inside. Luckily, an oppa came to the rescue in time, so he profusely thanked Kang Ji-yu again, making him shyly say it was nothing. I'm still pretending that I just want to help everyone, cleverly hiding my original intention. Unexpectedly, that generous act inspired Sella, who wanted to seriously study the scriptures to become an awakened person. Part 2. On the outside, he smiled and encouraged her that she would definitely be able to do it, but when he saw Sella rushing into the room to prepare, Kang Ji-yu really thought he shouldn't take this girl with him, carrying a branded weight. His hunting efficiency will decrease sharply. It sounds a bit heartless, but the truth is always hurtful. We must limit the risk to the minimum. The top priority is to regain strength. Because that dark hell taught Kang Ji-yu a profound lesson. If people do not die for themselves, he definitely cannot become a brainless idiot. Looking into the distance, he promised himself that he would regain his strength at all costs. While rehearsing together, Sella ran out and asked, "Do you have an ID yet?" Making Kang Ji-yu startled because he had a tooth under his lobe, it seemed like he didn't have any papers on him, so Sella immediately asked her brothers to go to the ward first. Holding the new ID card in hand, the 2 of them boarded the train and headed straight to the Fake Awakening Management Office. Kang Ji-yu was still surprised that the card renewal process happened so quickly. At that time, Kang-gu just stood there blankly, making the employee think that this person had a problem. He smiled but felt a little sad inside, thinking his name was listed as missing. It turned out that no one knew he had been missing for 5 years to report to the police, just like the days of living like a shadow. From school until adulthood, no one cared about Kang-gu's existence. Why has Kang Ji-yu been trying so hard for 10,000 years? When all the wishes to return to Earth were truly meaningless because no one was waiting, preparing to become a sad boy, Sella's clear voice rang out, pulling Kang Ji-yu back to reality. Kang Ji-yu was not very excited but still reluctantly looked away in the direction the girl pointed. The overwhelming scene before his eyes made the sad Kang Ji-yu cry out. Has the world changed into such a modern place? Sella said she absolutely loves this scene. Even though this life has too many hustle and bustles, people are always ready to cope with them. Sella's words made Kang-gu's worries fly away. Who knows, maybe things will be different from now on. The joy returned to Kang-gu's eyes, making the purple hair extremely satisfied. The 2 of them rushed forward together on the train. Finally reaching the status of the player management office, he followed Sella's instructions and a moment later the 2 of them stood in front of the office's headquarters in Seoul. This place was built with a modern, super huge dome architecture, making Kang-gu's eyes widen and admiring that this place was even bigger than Incheon Airport. Sella next to him hesitantly called him and then took out a black phone. Not knowing how to repay the benefactor, she saw that he didn't have a smartphone so she took out an old iPhone to give as a gift. Sella's attention made Kang-gu's dry and rocky inside cry, "You are truly a wonderful angel." However, at this point, the 2 had to go their separate ways, because Sella had to go register for a course for new people, and cutely said that after finishing work, "Let's go have dinner." Of course, Kang Ji-yu was happy and okay right away. After saying goodbye, he walked into the lobby, still surprised by the majesty of the building. Maybe this is where important people retreat, while helping ordinary players become extraordinary. To get inside, you need to get a queue number through the machine over there. Kang Ji-yu applied his new ID to scan the verified information and issued a waiting ticket with the number 18. Confused, he held the card in his hand and was notified by the system. He followed the directions to the waiting room, but he didn't say where the directions were. Kang Ji-yu kept making a confused face. At that moment, the waiting ticket vibrated, drawing a prominent line on the floor. Following that path, Kang-gu reached the crowded waiting room number 9. The conversation of 2 men behind him accidentally reached his ears. There was nothing noteworthy, until someone mentioned some strange captain names with admiration. Kong Ji-yu was curious, so he immediately Googled it. If you receive the title of player, improving your strength and making money will probably be better. After thinking for a while, it was Kong Gu's turn to be called in. A nearby door was opened. He quickly entered a large room where the awakened people were walking back and forth. Kong Ji-yu was assisted by a cute sister to his seat. The short-haired girl with glasses immediately gave him a ball to check his attributes. The higher the rank, the darker the color will be. Can I do something more difficult? Kong Ji-yu was obviously a demon king, so he was very arrogant. He was also afraid that he would stand out too much, which would not be good. Then he gently placed his hand on the ball, and immediately a bright light radiated around. Kong Ji-yu was still complacent, thinking that he had gone too far. The light still showed no signs of fading, making it impossible for the girl with glasses to read the results. After a while, it also went out. The proud expression remained on his face until the employee's monotonous voice rang out. Mr. Oh, Kong Ji-yu is an F-level fake lover. You can let go now. The simple words made him freeze. What is this? The employee was too used to those guys with delusions of power, so she didn't care about that look on her face like a goose pooping, and explained in a clear voice what the F-level abilities were. However, Kong Ji-yu didn't have the heart to listen anymore. His face was blank. Even though his power was sealed, he was still a bit psychologically traumatized even at level F like this. According to what the employee said, he could only enter the gate of the corresponding level. If he wanted to enter gates with higher levels, he had to have a sponsor, making Kong Ji-yu even more humiliated. If Dad were here, he would probably laugh at him for 7 days and 7 nights without stopping. Kong Ji-yu immediately fell into a gloomy state of, "You're the one who has prospered and fallen. You've been hurt for tens of thousands of years," suddenly becoming a waste person huddled at the bottom of society. I tried really hard to figure out how to level up. The first way is to take a basic course like Sella. When you finish, you will go straight to level D. The other way is to use magic stones. Of course, Kong Ji-yu is better at this method. The procedure was completed. Kong Ji-yu decided to quickly quit to avoid humiliation. The employee offered to sign up for the course to help him, but he refused. He let out a frustrated sigh. This guy was so difficult to seduce that he couldn't even get a single rose. The employee thought this guy must be too shocked to see the results, hoping that he would quit his job immediately or die there. At that moment, the transparent crystal ball suddenly appeared a black smoke that made her scream. They continuously spread and covered the ball and even spread outside. It was clear that the person just now was an F rank. As soon as she touched the pitch black sphere, it exploded. She looked at the broken sphere in front of her in shock, speechless. This is a case that has never happened before. Even the F-level Park Kong-young is just dark, definitely due to a technical problem. At that time, at the gate of Row E, the players were frantically searching for people to join the team. Some groups were looking for distributors, other groups were looking for magicians, and there were also people claiming to be thieves trying to find a team. Always, there were as many people passing by as ants. Everyone wanted their team to have enough people to enter the gate to do the mission, but wherever that thief went, he was chased away. Kong Ji-yu was quite curious why everyone criticized that thief. To fight monsters, people needed healing skills, fighters and all that, but they needed thieves to steal hearts or something, Dad. However, worrying about money was not his hobby. He quickly took out his F-level player card and used a blinding technique to trick the guard into looking at E-level. He casually entered the teleportation portal and walked out. A lush green forest quite similar to the forest that saved Sella appeared before Kong Gu's eyes. Because he was not used to using teleportation portals, Kong Ji-yu had a bit of a headache. Furthermore, he was constantly worried that if he went to the wrong portal, he would be taken to hell and he would be ruined. While he was standing there, he was almost lax, preparing to punch the monster, when suddenly a call came from above his head, causing him to raise his head to look, only to see a large black shadow hovering over him. This is it. This is a person or a bear. While wondering, that person said, "Dude, are you going alone?" Kong Ji-yu glanced over warily, What did this bull want from him? He kept asking around and around, making him angry. The guy's teammates on the other side were constantly calling Tesu, Tesu, but he was still focused on asking if Kong Ji-yu had awakened a second time. Without even saying a word, he answered. He howled, scaring the other two. Hoang was startled. Tesu looks big and has a chubby face, but seems like a good person who is enthusiastically inviting Kong Ji-yu to join his team. The corner of Kong Gu's mouth twitched up and down a few times. What a crazy situation. It wasn't just him who saw that Tesu had a problem, but his teammates were also going crazy. He didn't understand why the three-person team kept getting excited and invited strangers to join the team. Tesu was startled and turned to scold him. He had already decided to take the poor player alone. If they refused, they had to bear it. Seeing that, Kong Ji-yu was sure that this guy was indeed a good person, but he wanted to go solo rather than play in a group. Tesu completely ignored what he said, automatically shook hands and feet, introduced myself as Kong Tesu, and then excitedly asked what his name was. He reluctantly answered his name, and at the same time reiterated that he would not join Tesu's team. Suddenly Kong Ji-yu was stunned when he heard Tesu say that he is only 24 years old. This is 42, not 24 damn. Kong Ji-yu still thought that Tesu lied to him, until he pulled out his ID card to prove it. Looking at his teammates' faces, he understood that they couldn't believe it either. Kong Ji-yu is so skeptical about life. What has this guy been through to have a face as old as an eggplant? Seeing that guy was still waiting for him to join the team, Kong Ji-yu had to refuse outright, saying he already had a plan. So even though I was very touched by his noble spirit, I couldn't help but give up. Hearing that, the other two were somewhat reassured. It all depended on reporter Tesu's answer. At this point, he had to nod in agreement, but he still didn't forget to tell Kong Ji-yu to be careful because this was an area inhabited by goblins. In particular, there is also an extremely big and strong goblin boss. Normal goblins have nothing to compare with it. If you see it, remember to run away. This little guy is really cute. Kong Ji-yu said to himself, thank Tesu, then split into two ways. Your way, my way, I'll go. If he was an F-level new soldier, he would definitely return to his team. However, Kong Ji-yu is used to loneliness, so sorry baby I can't go with you. This beautiful weather is very suitable for hunting bosses. Kong Ji-yu rolled up his sleeves and walked straight into the forest. Suddenly he used flash to run away and everyone was gone. Based on the traces left by goblins on the ground, such as footprints or brutally killed animal carcasses, then just follow a goblin and they will lead you straight to the herd. Deep in the forest, a group of goblins was standing there. Suddenly a human came from nowhere and jumped into the middle of the hideous goblins. I've left you guys. I'm here to make a 7,749 dish buffet. Kong Ji-yu excitedly opened the stage by slashing the intestines of a goblin, then dragging its body away at high speed, scaring the rest of the crowd. The sword in his hand sharply cut in half, gently dividing the demon into two halves, in the horror of the demon in front of him. They've tricked me. The fear and anxiety of the goblins made him extremely happy. Each one held his weapon tightly but sweat continued to flow out. You know it's good to be afraid like that. The Demon King's aura in the underworld immediately rose up. Kangoo's twin swords were extremely bloodthirsty. Kindly give them a few minutes to prepare and then proceed with the purge. Yet there were still 3 fearless goblins, with crazy striped eyes and eyes that rushed up to attack Kong Ji-yu. With just one slash across his body, the whole group died before they could yawn, and his hunting time had officially begun. One side cut off the head in the blink of an eye, the other side threw a punch that exposed the monster's throat. In other places, he used a sword dance similar to a fan dance, slashing to pieces the stupid monsters with developed limbs. I only saw lightning-fast sword attacks, several goblin heads continuously being severed, and I was alone in the middle of the enemy encirclement but unharmed. Kong Ji-yu flashed his sword and slashed repeatedly. This green monster bravely rushed forward to attack. Before even a strand of his hair could touch him, he had already lost its damn hand. The 2 children on the other side were screaming at him, so angry that they would turn into headless corpses. Powerful punches were thrown, Extremely sharp slashes brought them to the sky. The sword flashed and its agile form made the monsters die before they could attack. This one seemed luckier because it got close to Kongu's ear and didn't have time to put the knife down. His burning eyes passed by, sending him off to follow his teammates right away. The bloody killing scene left only the sound of swords splitting flesh, along with howls of agony, and blood splashing out in all 4 and 8 directions. The few remaining demons were trembling in fear. The horrifying scene of carnage in front of them made their fighting spirit completely gone. The blade was covered in fresh blood that was still dripping. Kong Ji-yu couldn't help but exclaim that these guys had eaten so much to kill so many times and still not be finished. But it doesn't matter, the more I have, the happier I am. I'm coming here. Kong Ji-yu smirked and gave a crazy smile to the lovers who obediently stood still and let him skewer them. The dentist. After a long while, the blade in Kongu's hand finally rested. He panted and sweated profusely, wondering how many animals he had killed. In the middle of the peaceful blue sky is a land strewn with the flesh and blood of lovers, from their lair to a grave in the blink of an eye. Fighting these guys is simple, but the important thing is that there are so many of them that they consume a lot of Kongu's stamina. Suddenly the system panel appeared next to him. Thanks to defeating these monsters, he was promoted to level 4, his experience also increased, and his magic index increased slightly by 1 point. That means if you level up, your magic power will increase as well, but first Kong Ji-yu needs to verify one thing. I already know that there is no magic power in magic stones. I don't know if there is such a thing in these kills or not. The demonic energy began to block out and then immediately broke out brutally, spreading everywhere to grab the bodies. Kong Ji-yu finally felt the magic. The source of the magic power was derived from the goblin's body, not from the magic stones but from the magic stones themselves, with strength and weakness over time. Dead. This means that Kong Ji-yu can use the system's voracious skill to absorb these corpses and gain magic power. Spring has come to the village, brothers and sisters. He smirked confidently when he realized he was about to play the role of a fake president and ended up with a bunch of hidden magic stones to exchange for money. Adding the resistance increasing magic power from those we just killed, this goes both ways. After a while of absorbing the goblin's magic power down to his bones, Kong Ji-yu happily went to collect magic stones. I wonder how many chickens I can buy if I sell all these rocks. Seeing the piles of white bones stacked on top of each other, I realized I was eating dehydrated meat like I was eating chicken. Suddenly, the mention of chicken makes Kong Ji-yu crave it so much that he has to invite Sela out to eat when he gets out of here. Just thinking about the goddess's smiling face when eating chicken, already my mouth is watering. As if he was buffed to 1000% more power, Kong Ji-yu frantically picked up ice like a machine because of the scene today that Oppa would cover a chicken restaurant for him. Suddenly the ground seemed to vibrate because something hit it hard, causing Kangoo to stop packing his things and glance back. His face turned pale again when he heard a loud noise, and from the forest a huge monster rushed out. Is this what Tessu warned me about? What about the big and cruel love boss in the legend? The pair of odd green legs, as big as a top pillar, with a set of foot anchors that had not been filed for 8,000 years, ran majestically towards Kong Ji-yu. Its face was wrinkled, ugly with a protruding nose, its eyes lit up with deep hatred, looking towards the cunning brat who dared to destroy his descendants. The boss hissed with hatred, causing energy to flow out, covering the hand holding the weapon. What the hell is this? Kongu's eyes widened in surprise. Does this boss even know how to use magic? At that time, the demon howled again to show its authority, but its authority was nowhere to be seen. But its mouth smelled like a sewer pipe that hadn't been cleared for several years and could already be smelled from afar. Seeing that, Kong Ji-yu immediately took a fighting stance, one hand using his strength and the other hand thrusting the sharp blade forward. Sharp eyes assessed the situation. If it comes to destructive power, my magic is definitely much more advanced than this guy's magic. Just then, the demon boss had already chased him there. He rushed forward like crazy, roared loudly, his eyes flashed with fire, and quickly swung down a strike. Kong Ji-yu jumped to the side as quickly as he could and was able to get a slash that would kill the earth and rocks. But the demon was equally fast. it immediately grabbed the knife to chase and kill him. Seeing that the situation was as tense as a string, Kong Ji-yu leaned down to dodge the attack, but the love boss unleashed a sharp slash that forced him to jump back again. The demon ran briskly after its prey, walked to the head and slammed its knife there, causing smoke and dust to fly away, human legs dimly appearing in the smoke. The goblin boss is using all his strength to hold the sword down on Kong-gu's head, forcing him to kneel down to support him, gritting his teeth and using all his strength to strengthen his arms. The huge difference in weight class is causing him to lose. Advantage. The opponent is as big as a mountain and my child is like a dry branch. How can I handle this bet? It was with someone else, but Kong Ji-yu hissed too much and swung his sword, missing the boss's attack, causing it to lose momentum and rush to another place. While his opponent was confused, Kong Ji-yu tried to counterattack, but Love Boss used his invulnerable armor to dodge beautifully and even knocked him away. Kong-gu's twin swords only left small cuts, unable to damage a single inch of the goblin's flesh. And since it's so spicy, he can easily be thrown away by it because its stats are still so low and boring. If he wants to defeat this wild monster, Kong Ji-yu needs to find a bigger weakness. However, before he could even think for a moment, the blade was already flying towards his ass. He quickly jumped to the left to dodge. The knife slashed to the left but he dodged to the right. The boss angrily kicked him to relieve his anger and then used his dragon knife to swing down, but Kong Ji-yu had already lied flat on the ground and escaped. While he continuously dodged attacks and focused on finding weak points, the boss was still frantically chasing and fighting. Kong Ji-yu jumped back into the woods and began to rearrange the data he had just captured. The big arms are covered in tough armor, helping the goblin boss fight better. In addition, he is also the leader of the goblins, of course his strength must be on a different level than the goblins he killed. While thinking, the giant boss rushed forward and slashed the large tree with just one dig. Kong Ji-yu quickly jumped to the side and discovered the white skull of a goblin right in his path. Quickly grabbed that thing and immediately returned to the arena with the enemy. Kong Ji-yu smiled confidently and threw the skull right to the green monster's bald head. After all, these three goblins, even if they are the boss, are only there to entertain him. The boss was so busy looking at the flying object that he lost concentration. By the time it fell to the ground, Kong Ji-yu had been vulnerable for a few seconds. It was time for him to show it who was truly strong. Clenching his hand, exploding with anger, Kong Ji-yu gathered all the strength hidden inside, activating the power of Grozel's anger. Suddenly, the hand that was carrying the energy retracted and turned to cast magic. Go to the goblin boss. I love you so much that I give you the right to taste the essence of this technique. The stupid goblin looked stunned, not understanding what had just happened. At that moment, a huge source of energy rumbled up, making it start to stagger unsteadily, as if being pushed by the anger inside its body. That person. It looked more aggressive, but that was what Kong Ji-yu wanted, so he was extremely proud to look at his achievements. The goblin boss holds a sword filled with deadly force as he slashes out at extremely high speed. But the people weren't dead yet, but the trees were all gone, making it even more crazy, and the blood rushed a few more times, cutting off an entire section of the forest. Just now, Kong Ji-yu transferred his power as a kind of reinforcement, helping to amplify the boss's power many times over. Why didn't he use it on himself? Because the demon was in a frenzy, slashing at the ground, creating a rather large earthquake, causing rocks and soil to break into pieces and fly everywhere. This is the price that power brings about, the curse that causes the target's brain to become distraught and unable to swim. Attacks were continuously launched, but they were only the basic and confused attacks of a brainless person. From there, many weaknesses were revealed that Kong-gu's eyes had been waiting for. While the boss was still bewilderedly slashing back and forth, it was lightly cut twice on the knee by Kong Ji-yu, losing momentum and collapsing. His hands clenched into fists, preparing to deliver a finishing blow. Even though the boss could not move, he still screamed and swung his sword loudly. Kong Ji-yu did not hesitate any longer and just swung a sure kill blow, and in the middle of his body, only a pile of fresh blood spilled out across the screen. The goblin's massive figure began to collapse, so Kangoo only needed to take a few steps back to avoid having his head crushed by it. Looking at the monster's body covered in blood made me feel discouraged. The loss of strength made fighting a low-ranking monster also take up a lot of time. While waving his hands around in the classroom, the system panel suddenly appeared right in front of Kong Ji-yu. Because he wiped out the whole herd of goblins alone, he increased his level by 3, unlocked the second awakening and added a special skill. Seeing that, Kong Ji-yu felt excited and hesitated for a moment, then tried to see what was so interesting about the skill called Insatiable Hunger. Just hearing the name is sensational. Its effect is to help him absorb more magic power through the gluttony skill, which is not a terrible skill. From now on, Kong Ji-yu can regain a lot of magic power, making him feel that being a player is also beneficial. The journey to regaining his power is becoming much easier. He immediately tried out the new skill on the newly defeated item by placing his hand on the boss's bald head and activating Voracious Appetite. He saw a dense flow of magic power rising up. The flow of air was darker than before, making him wonder. Is this the effect of a special ability? Using Insatiable Hunger and Thirst affected the speed of magic power absorption to gradually become faster. In an instant his magic power increased to 19. Looking proudly at the thick-skinned goblin with only dry dew remaining, Kong Ji-yu was clearly amused. Seemingly satisfied with his Insatiable Hunger skill, Kong Ji-yu wanted to see how much increasing his magic power would increase his strength. Closing his eyes, he felt that the flow of magic power inside his body seemed to have doubled compared to before. Maybe it had to be tripled. Slowly, why did it increase so much? It's easy to suddenly die from shock like that. He doesn't want to become a skeleton like the boss next to him. That source of magical power increased exponentially, began to spread outward, and then brought Kong Ji-yu to a place with a blood-red sky called Manhwa Gate. Kong Ji-yu was surrounded by water, suspecting that the increased magic power weakened the seal on the gate. Opening his eyes, the dark scene had disappeared again. Kong Ji-yu returned to reality without understanding why there was no change other than awakening. Don't tell me that every time you unlock an awakening, the seal on the Manhwa Gate gets weaker. Thinking of this, the corner of Konggu's mouth suddenly raised. His eyes glowed red with the ambition to regain his original power through up-level. He had the motivation that made him enthusiastic, so he stood up and continued harvesting stones for a while. Kong Ji-yu hissed a devilishly evil smile. The next goal is to awaken for the third time at level 20, clearing all the rocks there. Considering today's work was over, Kong Ji-yu went out with Sella to a fried chicken restaurant. They said they were going to eat together, but who was eating and who was holding back could immediately tell by looking at them. Only Kong Ji-yu was eating the huge plate of chicken. His mouth was devouring a large piece but his hand was still picking up more. Raising it to his mouth and rustling for 2 to 3 hours, the bone was still there. When eating fried chicken, he had to drink more beer to be able to handle it. Kong Ji-yu raised his glass and took a gulp. Ha ha, it's too much Pepsi. I mean draft beer. It's been 10,000 years since he had the chance to eat this top combo again. Kong Ji-yu is so happy that he wants to fly into the sky. Watching him eat like a hungry ghost for a while before stopping, Sella smiled and asked if it was that delicious. Seeing him nodding excitedly, Sella softly asked, "Is it better than the kimchi soup I cooked?" There is no 10-point critical hit, making Kong Ji-yu, who was eating a delicious meal, suddenly feel bitter. What's with the cheekbones after 10,000 years of returning from hell? Everything has changed. Only the women are still dressed. If you ask me like this, my mouth will die. In the end, as a good boy, Kong Ji-yu definitely had to choose kimchi soup, fried chicken or something to sit in the chicken coop. Looking at him boldly and firmly declaring like that, Sella happily laughed that I was joking, but knew that if he chose a chicken, he would come and do business with her. Now Kong Ji-yu breathed a sigh of relief because he escaped the pressing, and the beauty personally picked up the chicken to feed him. Joy was continuing after joy when Sella's eyes slid down. Looking at Kong Ji-yu who was excitedly eating and drinking, he slowly said, "If you don't mind, let me ask, do you have any friends or family?" An awkward silence suddenly appeared between the two of them. Kong Ji-yu put the huge beer cup on the table with a thud. The fork in his hand also clattered to the floor. I honestly answer that I don't have any friends or family, let alone a decent place to live. Kong Gu's hand that was picking up the spoon clenched slightly. Sella slowly looked after him. Without thinking much, she said, "Do you want to stay at my house?" Kong Gu's face, which was already falling apart, widened his eyes in surprise and stammered back, "Are you sure?" Grabbing a new meaning and giving it to him, Sella said she wanted to express her deep gratitude to the person who had helped her escape the sun 3 times 7 times. If the goddess had such a heart, Kong Ji-yu would not hesitate to agree immediately, hoping that from now on the two could live together happily and have good luck. Sella was okay, didn't forget to ask, "I hope Kong Ji-yu will help me more in the future. This grandmother is also very smart." Sella's eyes kept glued to Kong Gu's body, silently guessing that Oppa had a lot to say to her. Who would have thought that my guess was so accurate, because it was Kong Ji-yu who was searching his bag and wanted to give me this. Placing a thick lump of money on the table, he said there was 3 million won in it, making Sella not understand what this brother was trying to express. As soon as Sella heard that this was a lodging fee, she immediately refused. She hesitated, "He helped me so much, how could he receive money?" Kong Ji-yu had to use all his strength to persuade. He understood Sella's difficult situation, so he told her that this was money for shopping to lighten the debt. A few seconds later, a piece of money lay on the table and a small hand reached out and grabbed it with sparkling eyes. Then tomorrow she will go buy better meat and cook premium kimchi soup for him, making Kong Ji-yu even more fascinated by the thought of eating kimchi soup every day. Sella is truly a golden angel given to him by God. Kong Ji-yu has decided, Oppa is willing to live forever just to see the smile on your face. Even if he is the demon king of thousands of demons, he is just a pretty guy with purple hair who knows how to cook soup.